Agnieszka Beata Magdalena Rojek, the 19th of January 2021, 20 past 9 p.m. Um, I believe many are waiting for the explanation concerning Dmitry Medvedev, who surfaced in my awareness as the president of Russia. I think I started my Facebook activity in 2009. I received two invitations. I thought that they were personal. I did not realize that they can be sent automatically through the mobile phone or through someone's email account. So I received two invitations. One was from my friend, my primary school and secondary school mate, Magdalena, and one was from a professor, Roman Kurkiewicz, who worked for Radio Tok FM. I stopped listening to Radio Tok FM in 2008. I started listening to the radio in 2006. But I remembered him, and because he is a professor, it was impolite not to take the invitation. So I registered in Facebook and I started my activity. At the time, I already had problems, and I was pretty certain that I would die within a year. It was on the spiritual level. The reason was my employment with the Veronese Gallery, actually with BMAT, representing Veronese Gallery in Poland, the sole representative of the Veronese Gallery in Poland. There's a broad context to this outlet located in Kazimierz, which is a Jewish district in Krakow. This is exactly the place where Spielberg was making his movie, The Schindler's List. He was doing it when I was in the secondary school, which is just behind the corner. So there's a personal context to it because we could not go to our favorite place where we would go during breaks. It was the fourth year of our secondary school, when you have the only lessons in the subjects that you take as your completion exam, and you have breaks, so you can spend the time as you wish. And we would always go to a Jewish cafe or little restaurant. And of course we could not do it because the whole square was packed with people participating in making of the movie. This is the place. So it was in 2009. I started working in March, and by May our cooperation ended. And that is after the 3 months of the period when you check whether it works or not. It did not work, but the consequences were potent. In 2008, I got involved in the internet activity concerning Tibet. This was the time of the Olympic Games in Beijing. And from my point of view, it was an occasion for raising the strong appeal for human rights, to which I add spiritual rights in Tibet, which is which had been, perhaps I can put it that way because we are at that time right now, which had been my great concern. That is related to my personality and my spirituality, which is not a one-track one. So I am a Roman Catholic, of course, by baptism, but there had been life before. I was born as Agnieszka here in Poland. And I became active, and I also signed the petition to the authorities of China, to the authorities of the People's Republic of China. So I am on that list. And I did some promotion of Tibet in my entries in the internet. I think I was still anonymous at that time. I used the name Dolphiness, and I was naive enough to believe that if you use this name, this nickname, and remain anonymous, it is a kind of unwritten agreement that you are not checked in any way, and that what really matters is your thought, and someone takes the thought or not. And that's all. So it was 2008. I also went to the Jagiellonian University to ask to address the students' self-governing body for organizing an action supporting Tibet. It turned out that they had been doing it on their own anyway. So I was informed, and I did take part in the manifestation in the street. And this was 2008. In 2009, I was jobless, and it was almost a full year without employment. So I had a kind of urge to get employed somewhere. And I sent an email with SOS to my friends. One of them responded with the offer of work for the Veronese, for BMAR. It was not a good offer, it was not at my level, it was under my qualifications. But I could sit in a shop, sell the products and learn. Shockingly enough, I started learning Russian then, and for the first time in my life I was able to read in Russian fluently the text that I was reading, and to sound Russian. That was very shocking, because at school I was really the laughing stock after trying to answer my teacher's questions in Russian during our class with my English R, which is not English, by the way, but that was the kind of Russian I was able to use in the secondary school. And suddenly a change happened. So that implies there was something Russian about it. And the point is that the products were made in China. So I think it was the only time that I actually prostituted, by which I do not mean anything of the sexual kind, but if you protest against the made in China and then sell the made in China, obviously you have, while your integrity is not in a good state. And I believe this is responsible for a lot of trauma and devastation that happened afterwards. But as I'm saying, it was about my mom being calm, knowing that there is the income. From the perspective of time, it was a very stupid idea to take the job and not to resign. But at the time, I did not know that. I only knew that I was breaking myself, but it was important for me that my mom was calm and happy again. My mom is very touchy on the subject of money, because as a result of the post-war situation, uh, she lived in poverty as a child. Then she went to work as soon as she completed her secondary school. She passed her school completion examination, the comprehensive school, liceum in Polish, a very good one actually. And she went to work afterwards, and she was working throughout her life. Um, so she changed her status, and she could live um, relatively safely nowadays if it had not been if it were not for me having no income at all. So she helps me, um, and that is a modest retirement pay anyway. Pension? No, not pension. Pension is when you are ill, isn't it? My English lexicon is blocked again. Anyway, to the point. Um, I felt terrible. So let me explain what I mean by the made in China. It's not that I have any issues with China as such. If you think of China, throughout ages, it is exactly the problem of the human rights. So when I was working there, I had that was a bit irrational actually, but I did have the nightmare of the little children that put ornaments on those cups or mugs, and the little hands, and they need to meet the quota, and they have no one to turn to for help. So, and it was like living a horror right there. It was happening to me. I could feel it. And so I felt terrible about myself still working there and not resigning. Um, um, well, that was irrational in the sense of all the ornamentation being actually machine made, computer made, I believe. So it was not handmade, but that was the kind of horror, emotional horror, and moral horror, and spiritual horror going on when I was working in the gallery. It might be there was some other connection where the children are really abused. So what needs to be added is a joke by one of my colleagues about the Tibetan blood being added to the filling. So this is why the hell are you connecting with such people? You have nothing to do with them at all. But I did, and I stayed there for the comfort of. The money was much below me. Already at the time, I should get at least 5,000 Polish zlotys for a month for my work, whichever employment it were to be. But I was not able to make it real either, which is probably one of my weak points. Never in my life have I been after money. I always had the certainty that if you do your job well, you are honest, etc., you will never be in need, because the money comes naturally. And when you do the excellent job I had been doing, then obviously you should have been getting rich. You should be getting rich. Excuse me. So I should have been getting rich, and I wasn't. And this is how I got stuck in the Veronese Gallery outlet in Kazimierz. Uh, so I went out with a trauma. There was the additional element of Mr. Bichak, my boss, trying to touch my hand, which triggered the incidents of sexual molestation in my life. The unwanted, unwarranted touch. Um, so I went out really traumatized, and believe it or not, I could not spend time in one room with someone who was male anymore. Um, and my organism was in a state of disintegration. I had this slant. I could feel that I'm traveling towards death, and I was really pretty certain that I would die within a year, which changed my mindset. And so I started doing whatever I can still do that is important for me, and every day counted. I felt this way about every day, that I need to use every single day. And it was 2010, 2009, 2010. I must say that I also took I thought of taking employment with my primary schoolmate, Dominic, who happens to be one of my one of the well, actually my first love, I think, in the primary school. We would go, we would take his hamster for walks. Hamster was his main attraction. Well, perhaps not. He seemed to be very polite at the time, and he was nice on the whole. And he I was always joking about him being the rational marriage. So if he doesn't find his love, and I don't find my love, we can get married. I don't think it was a good idea, but I asked him to go to the last, to the ball that we go to in the secondary school, Studniówka, with me. I was in love with my English teacher at the time, Arthur, and this is the overall context. So then I thought that perhaps he could help me, but it has turned out that he was my enemy actually, and it was quite unbelievable what he did to me, because I believe he was one of the first ones that violated my intimacy, which is totally unthinkable. A Catholic. I just can't find a place in my mind for finding an order in it. And I did go to his shop, the printing office, and I was doing some physical work there, that is putting the books, the pages of the book together, the sheets together to make a book, preparing it for making a book. With all those machines that are used for printing, they're working with the noise, and that was a damage to my brain. So after, when I went out, my brain was totally in a kind of fever. That is, I did not feel the fever, but that was a sense. And I also had a sense that someone was breaking into my mind. And my life should have never been investigated. To start with, I'm a law-abiding citizen, so there's no justification for the violation of my constitutional rights. And my life had been particularly sensitive, and it is related with my family, with my mom, with what she had gone through, with my dad, with what he had gone through. My dad was much older than my mom, and well, obviously much older than me. So in 2001, when he died, he was 85. So overall, the 2010 was had a special context to it, and I had this life dream of my love, of my beloved husband, who must be somewhere, and I really wanted to, and I really wanted him to find me. And it was like I'm an idealist, and love is very important for me. So I hope so much that he could find me somehow before I die, um, which I thought would happen within a year. Um, and then suddenly President Medvedev appeared in my space. As I'm saying, I was very naive, and I thought that I never had a thought that someone could violate my privacy, not to mention intimacy. Um, so if something was happening to my body, I never took it for someone's presence. I thought, I don't know, perhaps this is something that happens in your organism or whatever. Or, you know, just an impression you have, but not someone raping the sacred. I was a virgin, so it was obvious that there could be no memories. um, it, how come President Medvedev appeared? I was interested in politics. Um, Before the Veronese Gallery, I had wanted to work in diplomacy. Then I started having doubts because I saw that Opus Dei was there. And I had the sense that Opus Dei was trying to kill my life, so to say, making me the virgin, the sacred virgin, while I wanted to get married. I really wanted to find my husband and have children. And also there were other issues, Buddhism, first of all, and there was also Islam, but I was not aware of it at the time yet. I think Islam started with my reading The Alchemist. So before the 11th of September, and also I had watched the Bollywood movies that I had loved really. That I have always loved Bollywood movies. So one of the people that I liked in Facebook was Vladimir Putin. And as I'm saying, I'm really naive. So I had no, well, I'm still naive, but now I know a little bit more about life and political life. It needs to be emphasized that 2006 is the first time I started following politics. So 2006 is the first time I started, was the first time, has been the first time, was the first time actually. I started following the news. I had not done it before. And I added Vladimir Putin to the liked. So I believe there must have been an immediate action of checking the poll, this following Vladimir Putin not being a journalist, not being a politician, of which I was not aware. And I believe the same happened with Dmitry Medvedev. Now, it started getting personal when he appeared in my space. And what kind of attraction was it? Because I was attracted. Where to start with the photos he had? were of my kind. So there was a lot of nature there. And the way he looked at nature um, was beautiful for me, and this happens to be quite important for me because this is a spiritual thing. And generally, I believed that it comes from God. So when he appeared in my space, perhaps he was the husband, but he was married. So perhaps I could explain what attitude I had to his wife. I checked the information available in the internet, and it seemed to be a very romantic story in the sense of romanticism. Love at first sight, or perhaps not at first sight, but a beautiful story. So I thought, oh my God, terrible. And then I started also checking their relations right now. The attitude I had was the attitude I generally have to marriages, for which I will not get a pat on the back from the Pope, is that what if this is a marriage and this is a life, this is a marriage and it is a lie. But it might happen that they are unfaithful, they don't love each other anymore, they have parted because she went in one direction and he went in another, and basically the marriage does not exist anymore, so they are married formally, but of course there are other things like other issues or elements of life, or perhaps I could put it this way. Children, well, if they are little, then it's a problem. A lot, there's a lot. So my attitude was, the first question was, is this marriage alive? And from what I saw, it was alive. So I really didn't know what to do about it. But I always knew that the only way in which that could change, a possible divorce could come, would have to be one that has dignity in it, because otherwise there are no stable fundamentals for the new marriage. So if the wife, if it is not solved in such a way that the woman, the wife, the first wife, has her dignity and really feels that, I don't know, perhaps she has some new life or whatever, then obviously it cannot work. So one can be in love, but it never happens. And what never happens? Well, to me, of course, sex never happens. So, you can meet, you can be in love, you can look in his eyes, but you can talk for hours, and maybe the spiritual treason is far worse for the wife than the actual sex. But if you don't cross that line. But then if someone crosses that line, then whatever, I mean, you need to relate to it somehow. So basically, whenever any sexuality was arriving in my space, I always thought of my husband, of my real husband, wherever he is in the world. So spiritually, I was always with my husband, the one from the previous life, who should have found me this lifetime. And there has never been anyone else. I have never thought of any particular person, only about this spiritual presence that I think I have not located actually. Some people have been impersonating him, but I don't think I have found him. So this is about the general idea of how it should develop. What I was really dreaming about at the time, because I got involved emotionally, was meeting and I don't know, just spending time together, having a coffee. Perhaps going even better, spending a weekend in some house, but without sex, just, you know. Unlike other women, I I have had this experience of spending time with someone with no sex and sleeping one person in one room, another person in another, and we're just spending time together. And we sleep in one flat, but it doesn't mean that we have sex. Um, so just spending time together, and so that was the dream. Now it is of course a historical and historic situation. So let me share a bit of my spirituality with you. When it started arriving that the president of Russia might be my husband, the very one that we had been looking for and waiting for, I was terrified because I never belonged to the left wing in Poland. So I was not the part of the communist regime. I was totally outside it. And even in the primary school, as a 12-year-old, I stood up to protest against the obligatory membership in the Association of Friendship between Poland and Russia. Not Russia, excuse me, not Russia. Between Poland and the Soviet Union. There's a huge difference. I think I would be more willing to form a friendship with Russia. But not without knowing Russia, of course, because I don't believe in friendships that are superimposed. So I was not a part of it. I was totally outside, and I wanted to become a citizen of the United Kingdom, England, particularly England. My heart is in England. And well, apart from it being in Tibet, of course. um, um, so it was. I mean, oh my God, Russia, and you know, for a Pole, it is a disaster. And then the Smolensk catastrophe came. So, you know, after the Smolensk catastrophe, if you have whatsoever emotions for positive emotions or sentiments for Russia, you are dead in Poland. Because both believe that Russia is responsible for the catastrophe. My attitude is slightly different. I believe it's not only Russia that is responsible for the catastrophe, and I believe Poland might have participated in it as well. But I watched an interview. Tomasz Lis interviewed Dmitry Medvedev as the president of Russia. And I recorded that interview. I have it recorded on a video cassette, on a videotape. And I watched it. And I remember, I know there's a lot of social engineering in statu nascendi going on during such interviews, especially at that level of power. But at the time, I really believed that Dmitry Medvedev wanted the truth about the catastrophe. And the way he spoke about history, about the relations between Poland and Russia, that while we have that past, that past must be um, made clear, and it was the past, and we must depart from that past to build a better future, but not forget it. So what happened happened, and it cannot be denied. So these were two pillars on which I believed that it was possible to have a totally different relations with Russia. What was not said directly in the interview, I believe, is the attitude of Russia towards Poland. So Russia does not treat Poland as a partner. Russia does not see Poland as an equal, as a peer, which is a problem. And I would never accept it, of course. I do not see the status of a country in its armed forces, in its finance. This is the spiritual dimension that really matters for me. But nowadays Poland has gone bankrupt spiritually and morally, that's obvious. So we don't have it anymore, but we still have the potential. So the two pillars, the attitude to the past that was not that beautiful and needs to be faced for the future, so that the future would be different, and the willingness to do the investigation and to arrive at the truth about the Smolensk catastrophe made me feel morally right in remaining faithful to the real feeling I had, which was the initial feeling of love, no sexual associations, please. Nonetheless, I knew that I was going for hatred in Poland, and I did not know how it was going to develop. I also remember the time when Dmitry Medvedev went to China, and he was standing before the People's Republic of China. I think it was before BRICS went into a kind of momentum. It was an early phase, I believe. So with my fighting for Tibet, that creates an overall context of those relations. Where was I going? I was never going for a lover because I do not think, I do not, there's no possibility of having such a relationship with me. I am a wife. And I also thought of Russia. I mean, Russia. But I always thought that, were I to be up there in Kremlin, because that is exactly where I saw myself, I would have been prepared for it. So, it's not like, okay, Agnieszka, let's check. It's basically, you are taken care of, and you go step by step, and you learn everything. So on the spiritual level, I really believed that if there is the love that should be there, then such a marriage would be great for both countries.